Well, hello.
Hello.
Hey, Don, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Happy 2025.
I can't believe it is here already. It feels like 2024 went by in a blur, and here we are already.
Yeah, that's by the seat of our pants, I suppose. But
Isn't it like everything that MSPs do?
yeah, of course, yeah. There's a plan for everything, just not written down yet.
Exactly. Exactly. So, what are we doing here today?
Today, we've got an awesome panel assembled to discuss cybersecurity and compliance in 2025, putting kind of our soothsayer uh, to the test here.
Cool. I wonder if anybody actually brought their magic 8 balls because I'm super stoked to see somebody just, shake it once and be like, nope, uncertain. We're just going to put that back down and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll have a lively discussion with this bunch of people. So,
We will. Let's get into our usual stuff with our industry headlines. What has happened since we last spoke?
all right. So there was an announcement this morning. The White House is putting out their U.S. Cyber Trust Mark. This is around IoT devices. Be details that you can find in both the Discord as well as Reddit and the White House's website.
I'm super excited about that.
I worry about the efficacy of it, but I'm sure that'll get touched on today as well.
Absolutely. What else is going on?
Telegram, the messaging app, handed over a bunch of data on a bunch of their users to law enforcement. Shocker. Surprise Pikachu. Sonic Wall, surprise, surprise, another SSL VPN vulnerability. Please update and patch your stuff. And lo and behold, the telecom compromise that is the gift that keeps on giving. We keep finding out that it's worse and worse and worse.
Again, surprise Pikachu.
Yep. What events did we have here recently?
We had a huge holiday break. Hopefully, everybody had a wonderful time with their families and friends over the holidays. And then, of course, to kick things off is CES. It's still ongoing, I believe, until the 10th of this month. So hopefully, you've all found something interesting. I know I was watching Scripps News this morning, and they had some stuff from CES on there. One of them was is a new boxing app to show you just how strong you actually were against a boxing bag. And I was like, that's kind of fun and not all at the same time.
Yeah, well, and as I've been watching some of NVIDIA's announcements, some interesting things that they're doing, of course, both in AI as well as the graphic side of things. So be interesting to see what other announcements come out this week.
Yeah, I think if we all watch the stock market, we'll try to figure out from there who's excited about what and why. So that'll be interesting to see. Well, without further ado, because we have an amazing lineup, we're into the future of cybersecurity and compliance for 2025. So we want to get our speakers up here and get them introduced. So here we go. Everybody say hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
All right. Know pretty much everyone is pretty well known here in the space, but I would appreciate if you guys would mind going around doing a quick introduction on who you are and where you live in the world. Roddy, start with you.
Oh, hi. Roddy Bergeron. I am the cybersecurity technical fellow. Some will say the fullest fellow at Sherweb. I live over in South Louisiana. So day to day, just helping out MSPs out there, making sure that they got their cybersecurity programs together for the most part.
All right, CJ.
CJ, I'm the senior director of cybersecurity compliance programs at CompTIA, and so yeah. Oh, where am I from? I'm from Iowa.
Yeah, artist formerly known as CompTIA, right?
I think until it changes, we would say that we are still CompTIA.
All right. Joy?
Joy Beland, Vice President of Cybersecurity Compliance at Summit 7. Super happy to be here, and also the least funny of all of you guys. So you guys will have to bear with me.
Appreciate you being here. And Matt?
Well, if you're doing least and most, I'm the funniest looking. all of us if we're doing extremes in this situation. No, it's great to be here. Matt Lee, I'm a recovering MSP, and I work with PAX 8, and I do like what Roddy does and educate and work in our world and try to make the place a little better for the next ones that come. And I guess I'll always say this when I'm on webinars with this human, but I'm a student of Joy Beland. And so that's where I got my early start in cybersecurity. So I'm happy to be here and give some of my thoughts, y'all.
Awesome. And I know you've got this CyberRise thing. You mind touching base on that real quick? Because I know that's kind of
you're going to get me in trouble being the first place we ever really talk about this live. But all right. No, that's cool. I don't think anybody else will care. No, Robert Chaffee and myself and Jason Slagle, at least as we start it, and we're going to expand that quite a bit over time, we're kind of put in a position where in order for the emergency response team that the three of us were such a part of and love and think is such a service to our community, we were allowed to spin out into a separate 501c3 from CompTIA's auspices. And they're helping us fund this, at least in discussion. And as we continue to move forward in the new organization, we'll see how that lands. But we're now housing ERT. And what we found is with CyberRise, we are a great insurance vehicle and housing place for several programs. One of those being CyberRise, another of those being the initiative that a lot of you have helped with around mapping frameworks, and then the other being the hackening as well. And so that'll provide some legal and governance structure and management for sub-organizations. So yeah, CyberRise. I'm also the director of CyberRise. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know we've got a lot of stuff to get through today, Dawn. I doubt we're going to get through all of it, and I'm sure there'll be some comments from the audience here today. But you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with this one. So looking into your crystal balls or magic 8 balls, whichever one you want to shake and give us the best stuff that you've got, what do you think is the most significant threat that MSPs should prepare for this year, upcoming?
Who wants to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll go. What is a threat, right? Let's just make sure we get this figured out for everybody that's listening. So, right, a vulnerability is something I'm vulnerable to. Like I particularly am vulnerable to bullets as a human, right? A threat is someone shooting at me with a gun. So let's just make sure we're talking about threats. We're talking about active things that are going to happen. So what is the threat that I think is going to happen for MSPs? I think there's a threat from regulatory, compliance, and contractual risk that is just not existed for MSPs in the same way that it is today. And Joy, you're the expert here, so I won't steal your thunder on that side of it. But things like HIPAA's changes that are proposed and the things we're seeing contractual and lawsuits, the comeuppance of breaches from days past. And I can say B the word here because they've been paid by insurance. If you look at the past with Traveler's initial lawsuit, that happened 2 years after the initial payment of that of that insurance payment. We're way deep into that point. And while we may be seeing slowdowns of ransomware today, I think it's going to be that remnant comeuppance, I suppose, is the best way to describe it in my mind. That's probably the biggest threat. Gun to head from a technical tactical problem, I think it really is very related to token theft, device registration, and continued social engineering for both of those to end in BECs and ransomwares and all kinds of extortion things. So that's my thoughts. The rise of the LLM makes the SE easier, the social engineering easier in my mind.
I'm curious to see if there's weaponization or compromise of hardware that originates from adversarial nations. We've seen that a little bit, and I don't think that we've seen the full extent of the capabilities that they have by any means. So especially as we look at the political landscape and the posturing that's happening right now, it's going to be very interesting to see how quickly that could escalate.
Yeah, I'll go. So we were talking about this the other day, right? And it's not so much we say what threats? Are we talking about new threats? Or are we talking about hey, just the same old existing stuff that people still seem to not get right? Right? So you're patching your external services that are exposed that shouldn't be exposed or overexposed. Are we talking about just good old fashioned phishing? Right? If you go look out there, I think the last thing I saw was 9 out of 10 Microsoft compromises or especially accounts are all still phishing, right? Despite the fact that we have increased the amount of MFA out there, we've increased awareness around it, we've increased just education and best practices, right? The same stuff that we've been preaching about, I feel for years, is still on the horizon and it's still going to be an issue this year, right? you talked about in the intro, SSL VPNs, right? Like how many vulnerabilities per year do we still have to worry about because people have SSL VPNs overexposed, or they don't have technology users don't have good patching policies or patching processes in place. So my prediction for 2025 is we're going to see the same old with regards to what's causing major breaches out there.
Sure.
Lowercase b's, lowercase breaches.
The unconfirmed ones, is that what they are? Lowercase.
Well, I don't
lowercase b here.
Yeah, or as Cody Kretzinger would say, like, is it an uppercase I incident or a lowercase I incident?
I would go with, I think the clicking on the link. I was reading an article. They were talking about that 1 in 1,000 emails that are malicious get clicked on, and I was like, well, that's not that bad. That's like less than 1%. And then I'm like, wait a second. It's just saying the volume of email that's clicked on, not the number of people that are clicking on one of those
Correct.
1,000 emails.
Summatively, yeah.
And and so I think that the threat in that space, surprisingly, is still increasing significantly. And this is an area I think that we have a significant opportunity in the MSP space to potentially make a positive impact on reducing what's happening there if we can get the education out there.
Don, from the MSP perspective, what's something that's on your radar for this next year?
I mean, everything that everybody else has already mentioned, I think those are things that we all need to take a secondary, tertiary, 4th, 5th, 17th look at, because we've missed it every single time in some way, shape, or form. Big thing for us this year is data. How can our clients' data be used? What can they do with it? How is it leaking? What does it look like for them? So I think we're focusing in on how to control flow of data in, out, and around. And what does that actually look like? Because so many people are moving all of their stuff into the cloud and places like that. I think that's just someplace that we want to focus in on and make sure that we're doing our due diligence, they're doing their due diligence, and they're not doing something silly because they've not thought about how it can be used against them potentially. So what about you?
Yeah, tangential to that, I would say that one of the big threats I see is all the people that rushed to input data into AI and without any data classification, and I think that there's going to be there will be a comeuppance for all the people that did that.
Bingo.
I think that will be interesting to watch how that's weaponized against people.
Well, we go back, kind of, Henry, in that idea of, right, whenever everyone rushed to the cloud with lack of controls, and then we were like, oh, you have some Amazon buckets just publicly exposed, and you didn't properly put controls in place in front of your APIs, and like we're gonna go through the same thing with AI, where there was a rush because everybody wanted hot, new and shiny, and then we worry about controls later, right? It's the same to me, like song and dance, just like peel the cloud sticker off the problem and like apply the AI sticker to it.
But we can put the new White House trust mark sticker on it instead, right?
Oh, that fixes it. It's actually like a seal. As long as you don't break that seal. Yeah, it's secure at that point.
As the joke I made this morning, I was like, "Are we go? Do you peel the sticker back and it says Clipper chip installed?" Like that's for everyone who remembers the Clipper chip fiasco.
I want to bring it back to the identity side of this as just an overall totality kind of prediction. Why are we seeing business email compromises, massive Microsoft attacks, things to those cloud resources Roddy just mentioned? And I was talking about this in another webinar earlier today with Blackpoint of ultimately there's a shift towards the cloud for most of our SMBs and non-code producing entities. Even modern code producing entities are very identity-centric, cloud-centric. They don't have as much legacy brownfield. A lot of MSPs don't. They're mostly Entra ID or some other front-end identity and extending that into SaaS applications. So the shift to cloud is kind of that whole bank robber that said, like, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is, stupid. Right? And why do they attack the cloud? Because that's where the money is, stupid, right? And the ease of it, the scalability. Back to AI in the future of this is all of that exposed data that's been out there and all the breaches that we have seen and all the very rich and contextual information now could be fed much better into dedicated LLMs to drive very good targeted spear phishing methodologies that make that 1,000 per click rate go way higher, Chris, to your point, and make the efficacy of that and lowering the barrier to entry while doing that, right, and spreading that. So I think this is why I say the year of the comeuppance and the kind of the year of this have and have nots, which is what I predicted in my blog post of, at some point we're going to start seeing that the people that are kind of prepared for this, that have done the work, like many of you on this call right now, like they're going to work through this. Like it's going to be okay. The ones that haven't are going to start seeing death of various different methodologies, I think, out there over the next few years. This year's starting a lot of it in my mind. Not to be the grim reaper here, but yeah.
You can't prepare for it if you don't think it through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try and give some governance towards it and operate upon it and, those things. Yeah. But yeah, I digress.
100%.
So along the lines, Don, go ahead.
Well, it was more along the lines of can regulatory compliance save us, right, from any of this stuff? Or is it just going to, what are there changes that are coming? You talked about a couple of them already, but will they help or will they hinder? Or
on what time horizon? Right? Like on what time horizon?
Right? So let's say for this year, let's go with that.
Yeah, principally not. I don't know. Joy, you go. You have better thoughts on the one that's
What I'm hoping happens is that MSPs embrace compliance simply for the learning process of following the maturity, of implementing through a framework, of embracing governance, risk, and compliance all together. Being able to scale their businesses with bringing in an expert who has been swimming in those waters for a long time, because it's frankly, it's foreign. There's pieces of that have been brought into the MSP community, but we all mature as an industry when we embrace compliance. That
Agreed.
Being able to have a solid set of checklists and achievable actions that we can have validated by a third party, that's something that's going to serve the entire industry so much better. Right. So I love
it brings dollars into the mix, right?
Yeah, that's right now voluntary, but it's going to be interesting to see how regulations are going to force this on some of those MSPs that choose to participate, right? And those that aren't choosing to participate on the forced regulations would be well served to look at it anyways.
Yep.
I love the way that you said that, just from the standpoint of MSPs understand that if we're running EOS or any other type of business operating system, it doesn't matter what it is, we know that if we follow the checklist, if we follow the process, if we follow all of these things, we can scale, we can do things. It makes our lives so much easier. And yet we don't do it on the actual compliance side so often. It's like the light bulb hasn't clicked on yet. So I think that's a really, really good way of putting it that we understand.
Yeah, I have an indirect way that MSPs may be impacted by compliance too, Joy, and I'd love your thoughts on this just in general, and everyone's actually, I suppose. But think about services you sell as an MSP. You sell anti-malware, let's say. At any point in time, did you tell your client that in order to meet their compliance, they need to store those monthly reports for the next 7 years so that they could prove it 4 years later down the road that they had it at that time of the compromise or something discovered later? I think this will be the year of compliance services, meaning that help drive that compliance. Not necessarily doing the compliance and not necessarily being the one measuring it, but just if you're selling this as an MSP and you're selling EDR, have the report prepared, show that the machines were protected, tell them and instruct them they need to store it, or store it for them as a service, or drive. What are y'all's thoughts on that, just as an opener on some of the path forward in 2025?
So what I'm hearing is that you're thinking that we're going to finally make this transition to a prescriptive doctor approach to some of these relationships.
Well, you're going to stop using scalpels that you haven't put in the autoclave in 5 patients, right? I think that's the part we're going to talk about, really, if I'm honest.
Well, yeah. I take it back to this analogy I always use, right? If you went to an attorney and you're like, I need a good attorney to represent me and to be in my best interest in this criminal case or civil case or whatever, and you ask them, are you in good standing with the Bar Association? And they said, no. Would you still continue that conversation, or would you say, I want somebody who at least can prove they're ethical and knowledge and all the other things you look for in an attorney, right? And I think you're going to
Do they work on contingency?
Yeah. Can they do pro bono? Like, yeah, you know,
That's
like
right.
that's the conversation I think you start having is as downstream from enterprise, right? As medium and small businesses start to realize their risks, they're going to look to their providers and start saying like, okay, well, how can you prove you do what you do? And how can
Exactly.
you prove
Exactly.
Remember all of those
over there
reports we've been showing you for years, and you're like, we don't want to see those.
that you've
Sure.
been showing, Don, not the 6 other MSPs. Or 6
And
other
remember when I
providers
show you this one that says you don't have it on these 5 machines? This may impact you later on if you're called to the carpet about meeting these compliances and need to show evidence for this period of time, and you now can't, and you now prove that you couldn't and didn't do it. You actually have that other side of the coin, too, starting to play out of, as we're documenting this, then means that the review of it needs to check for its validity and what we're trying to meet as an objective. And it brings it all the way back to Joy's point of, without compliance and something as a measuring stick, we don't have something to measure against to see whether we've met our goal, I would say.
And really what you're speaking to that I love about CMMC in particular is that we are forced as an industry to demonstrate a shared responsibility matrix.
Yeah,
and
man.
so this is the first time that the government's saying, look, you can have an MSP come in and help you get there, but they're going to have to sit there during the assessment. They have to generate this document that shows line by line what they're responsible for, what you're responsible for, and talk about a brilliant way to limit and reinforce our liability as service providers, right? I mean, this is the best detailing. It's a representation of maturity in so many different levels that our industry needs to get to anyways, no matter what framework it is that we're working.
So, I know Trustmark kind of touches a little bit on some of the self-regulatory aspects of this. You want to kind of bring that in to the discussion?
Yeah, I was thinking about the analogies that were being given, and I was thinking about like, you know, when they talk about like, you know, if you want to lose weight, there's this like really cool pathway that you can take, and the person that's telling you about it is like as jacked as one can get on whatever program they were on, and then they give you these list of things that you can do to be just like them. The only problem is they've been working on their plan for 20 years, not 20 days, right? Like theirs has been a long time to get to where they are, and I think what we're seeing today is, and you know, you just saw this come out with the HIPAA recommendations that's under public review right now, and some of the things that are in there are like, you know, we're definitely going to enforce 2FA, and we're definitely going to say that you need to do, you know, vulnerability scanning at least every 6 months. And these are things that have been broadcast either through compliance or in the cyber hygiene spaces for as long as I can remember the word cybersecurity being used in a sentence. The Trustmark, CMMC, and some of the other stuff we're talking about is saying, no more are we going to say, hey, put a sticker on your little sheet if you know, went on a walk today. We're saying we want proof. We want to see the recording, the report that showed.
I mean,
that you
I can't fill out my own
walk.
bingo card, Chris. Is that what you're saying here, CJ?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I want someone to look at Matt's bingo card to make sure that he wasn't filling out into the zone. But that's where the Trustmark comes into play too. For an MSP, I haven't found really anything that we've talked about on this show or with other webinars where if you are picking a framework and you are doing what is in there, that you won't be able to show some level of maturity that would withstand, you know, scrutiny. And I think CMC, the Trustmark, and others are saying we got to take this further than we ever have before, because you can't just say X box and I'm doing something else now. My clients don't want it, so I'm not going to force it on them. That's not how this works. They're all do it, or we're stuck with the boat sinking because you keep digging a hole in the middle of the boat.
Yeah.
I caught a bit of that, but yeah.
Megatron finished up the last time. But no, like this is where like everybody's conversation comes to a point. Like when I was at DEF CON, right, and Jen Easterly was on stage and she was just like, hey guys, like we don't want to regulate you, but like stop making us want to. Right? Like she's like, you guys can easily fix this by
stop licking the electric socket, please. Pick
a framework. ISO, CIS, NIST, you know, Essential 8, pick something. But she's like, it's like, we're just not doing it. So like, we don't want to step in. We hate, like, as she said, regulation's the bane of my existence. But like, if we have to, we will. And now that she's like stepping down, it's like, well, who's gonna champion the we don't want to regulate you if we don't have to? Like,
Yeah.
that's the scary part, right? Like, are we facing further regulation, right? Like we see the
Well, we
attacks on
certainly
critical-
are and should be, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's just be honest.
We should
And
be.
I do a talk about this a lot, and y'all can stop me if you want and for just time's sake. But, you know, talking about how every major technology in the world that's ever been developed goes through a period of 80 to 100 years that we live and enjoy the benefits of AC and think about chloroflora, what? But we're happy with our boxers in the downstairs, right? And eventually there's regulation. We change it. Same thing with automobiles. At some point, we decided that there needed to be barriers to entry and massive amounts of investment and insurance and having products tested to safety efficacies and certain levels and required equipment and niche to standards. And all. We're at the very beginning of that, y'all, which is time to make tons of money, time to be the one ahead of the bear behind you, right? Or the person behind you when the bear's chasing. I mean, ultimately, we're kind of at that early stage. And I propose that, to your point, we're going to keep seeing more and more regulation. I think we'll probably see more civil aspects play out over this next year, like the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative and the expansion into more and more HIPAA, things to that nature this year in the immediacy, which will mean show me those records from 5 years ago. And all the way back to Joy's shared responsibility problem rearing its head, can you prove to me that the MSP was not responsible for storing that for 7 years to prove that you had these in place?
Yep.
Or did you have that in your shared responsibility that the client was responsible for it, right? Or did you not even speak to it? And now where does it fall? So I think there's these interesting things that were time bombs. They're going to come up this year a lot in that way. CMMC is a great example of that, where you go get assessed and you fail, and now it may hurt you, and now you realize it's because the pre-assessment didn't uncover the MSP's incapability of meeting those standards or evidentiary requirements for shared responsibilities. Okay. Anyways, I'll shut up. But
You know, I was always like, whenever COVID happened in 2020, everybody was like, "Hey guys, like I'm essential." I'm like, that's not as cool as you think it's.
that may have things that come back later.
That may have things to come back. Well, you're essential. You need to follow.
I
You
can
need to follow
attest
some
it wasn't
security.
fun.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? We see the attacks on critical infrastructure. You know, water, power, gas, you name it, right? And like, okay, cool. Like, then expand upon that. Like, who's next? And it's like, who was essential in 2020 that needs to protect
Technology
their infrastructure? Everybody, like everybody was.
In
essential.
Microsoft's recent report, that was the largest category starting to be attacked was IT infrastructure, IT providers in 2024. So
correct. So like that's where we're seeing. That's what's going to happen. Like we're going to get as an essential service, we're going to get regulated. It's where the money is. It's where the ease of access is.
Do you guys see any, or I guess the initial regulation that we're going to see, do you think that'll be around any specific area or thing, or do you think it's going to be kind of tying breach notification laws together between the various states? Or
yeah, here's my 10 cents tour, right? Like we have so many different states putting up privacy regulations. We don't have a federal equivalency to GDPR, right? Like that's where it's going to be with all these incidents happening where, like, you know, the DMV in Louisiana gets hit with the vulnerability, and you know your healthcare provider got hit. Like we're not going to target industry so much as I think we're going to target privacy.
individuals.
Yeah, we're gonna target privacy
and contractual failures,
yes,
right? Like all of the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, which if y'all remember, that started in 2021 in October by Department of Justice, and it was $2.2 billion in settlements in the first year. Like there was already $1 million case with a small healthcare provider in the first 3 months. So you see them talking about expanding that. It expanded massively in 2023, 2024 as well. So I think contractual come-uppins are probably the fastest. That would make that somewhat industry specific to anyone that spent money with the United States government under that current auspice. But it is inclusive of 800-171. And I think you'll start seeing more and more of that be a play that we see. So, and then the other thing that I'll think plays out more this year is probably actual straight up civil lawsuits, mainly aligned along privacy, to Roddy's point, and other things in that regard. But I think you'll start seeing some class actions and people that start making precedents in case law in 2024 or in 2025 specifically around a lot of the stuff from 2024, 2023, 2022, 2021, the movies, the rack spaces.
Already happening. I mean, you saw the one that's recently tied to the baking space where there's a lawsuit now over a guy who was basically, I don't want to say I think it was like equivalent of pig butchering scam, but he's suing the bank saying, how are you allowing fraudulent accounts being created without any sort of background check as to who or what
The
is
know your
behind this
customer
bank
rule
account?
problem.
Know your
Thanks to the
customer.
Oh,
Yeah.
PCI.
And
I have a
yeah,
whole
and
soapbox about that.
sweet.
So,
Uh,
as you all know, Social Security numbers were leaked, breached, whatever you want to call it, this year. And if
Each
yours
time.
wasn't, you were lucky. Mine was. That was fun. Um, and dealing with Experian and all of the fun big groups out there. Well, Experian has it so that as long as you have a Social Security number, you can just call into their service and unfreeze credit. You don't need any additional information. So basically, they're just re-victimizing people because they're not controlling the
yep.
data
Yep.
on
I love
repeat.
Steven's question there. That's dope.
Me too.
Of this. And I actually think this is the most positive that comes from the death and attrition of people that shouldn't be in this space that come. In the sense that if we start seeing the comeuppance this year and this have and have nots and this spread of breadth of MSPs losing clients that aren't prepared because they're getting popped, losing themselves because they're themselves getting popped, having regulatory or contractual comeuppance that start to erode it. But it also creates the ability for market to be created on the other side to take that business and drive it forward and make it successful and grow. So I actually think this is a rebirth necessary out of this world. And I really think that that consolidation that Stephen speaks about of what the positive impact will be. And Joy, you're really right in the thick of this in both of your charitable works as well as in your business works of you're seeing consolidation in the industry. You're seeing people band together to have more power together. You're starting to see people do the right things and profit from it. And I'll take this all the way back to a story about one of my early clients in like 2017 or 18 in the 800-171 days was getting ahead of the security requirements, doing all the things, getting his SSP in place, like way before anybody was ever going to look at it. And it didn't make sense for anybody whose competitors asked, how long could I lie? And instead, in his rate readiness reviews with Northrop Grumman and with Boeing and with Spirit, he got more business because he was able to demonstrate to them that he was ready for the crap they didn't care about yet.
Absolutely.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing the clients who have done the early preparation and early assessments for CMMC flourishing. Like the return on investment is outstanding.
Exactly.
We are seeing a huge backlog coming into the MSPs that are really doing CMMC well. Like there's 300,000 small businesses or contractors that are going to need help getting through CMMC. Like that's an incredible market. But one of the things that I love about Stephen's question is, how does this have an impact on their non-government clients and the MSP industry as a whole?
Yeah.
I think that the vendor community is going to have to step up and is stepping up in some regards, that they've had enough questions about when are you going to be ready for CMMC? How are you going to help me? Am I going to have to rip and replace you out of my security stack? And it's really making those vendor representatives learn to speak the language about regulation and compliance, learn to get their own shared responsibility matrix in place. Some of them are now going after FedRAMP. So I think it's informing and maturing the vendor community as well, which is super important. They've been treating it like it's something that they don't have to be involved in or don't want to be involved in. And the fact is that we are one ecosystem, right?
Right.
It's really helping the end clients, the MSPs, and the vendor community all to grow up.
Awesome.
I would add that the growth of that pressure is also forcing people that are maybe on the fence about doing it and going through the work and are saying no. I mean, even the same days when RMMs became the answer and getting towards the best white glove experience and RIM and all the things, some people said, I don't want to do this. I'm going to sell. I don't want to do this. I'm going to sell. And I think you're seeing a lot of that M&A activity that comes out of this too, that starts to come from the pressure that's being placed from a client requirements. So, yeah. Yes.
Joey, I was going to ask, for those that are not going down the CMMC path as an MSP, what do you recommend that they look at doing in 2025 as it relates to CMMC? Because there are implications and there's going to be an effect on non-direct government entities that MSPs are servicing. do you recommend them to partner with someone, or do they need to get their shit together and
Yeah,
start?
well, when you say partner, I mean that's the hard thing about CMMC is that you can't perform the IT capabilities for a DIB customer on their behalf and not expect to be going through CMMC, period. That isn't something you partner with somebody else for them to do it for you. If you are the one that is provisioning their new accounts, if you're the one that's securing their network, you're the one sitting in the assessor's hot chair answering the questions, showing how you exactly align to the shared responsibility matrix with all of your processes documented, and you've got print screens and you can whip up the sonic wall to demonstrate how you're navigating the firewall boundary. You're in it. There's no partnering. And I think that that's one of the things that concerns me the most is that there are other MSPs or vendors out there saying, oh, we'll help you get ready. Don't worry, you can keep all of your customers. And you really have to take it seriously and be able to answer every single assessment objective yourself. That's not what a partner's going to do. If you're the MSP,
Right.
you're answering the questions.
But there
Right.
are partners that will give guidance to MSPs for paid services or for other things to help them down that path, right? I mean, even in
Yeah,
your
to help
former
them
world
get
at
ready.
Edwards, right? Yeah. But
Yeah.
I agree with your point 100% otherwise than that, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
which kind of
facilitating
upsets me,
that.
Joy, when I see the $500 CMMC in a box ads, and I'm like,
I'm out.
yeah, I'm
Sure.
like, what is this? You know,
I'm
like
out.
there's no earthly way that for $500 someone's
The
gonna
box
get ready.
is the enclave, and that's
Yeah,
all. Like, you can't do anything else. It's
It's a
just this
cardboard
box, like a
box.
cardboard box. Yeah,
Yep.
legit.
There you go. Here's your
Yeah.
CMMC in a box. Yeah. No.
It's got a tiny little
I
3D
think that's
printer.
I think it's part of the problem, right? Like you have people like Joy, and you've got like your Mark Menzies and your Dons, and these people who are just like, this is a process for you to go through, and it's complex, and like, but it's for a good reason, right? Like we have to defend our supply chain in the defense industry base. And there are other people going like, it's so easy, guys. Let me build you an enclave. And it's like, no, it's not. Like there's more than just the technical side of things you have to look out for. Like when we had partners who had DForce compliant stuff, right? It's like, hey guys, like what access controls do you have around your printed binders that have CUI in it, right? Like it goes way beyond that, and I don't think people are ready.
Like,
People
what do you
don't
mean?
understand the full scope of that, right?
It's totally
What's
fine.
a-
They don't grow
what's a
feet and walk away.
I got 110 spur score and a poem, right? Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's pretty. It's got our logo on it.
Right.
So yeah, so
I
like
think-
I think there's a disconnect, right? There's the people who are doing it right, and like you need to follow them and understand it, and then like try to stay away from the snake oil
But-
portion of this, right?
I would even say if you put CMMC off to the side for a second and think about all the MSPs that are saying, I'm not going to do it because of the complexities. And so maybe they're pursuing the trust mark or they're looking at CIS top 18. And, the reality is these aren't things that you just get someone to give you a bumper sticker that you can put on the back of your car because your kid made honor roll and you want everybody to know about it. Like the reality is this is something that you actually have to do. And it's going to take more than 60 seconds to get it done.
So
That's a new bumper sticker we're coming out with for the next
If you can see
event.
this, you're too close.
So, what are some things we can do to help combat that this next year? Because there's a lot of marketing misinformation, not just around CMMC, but cybersecurity in general. So, what are some things that we can do to, look at the MSSP overnight, the $99 pen tests, those types of things?
My year in office has taught me one thing, that sometime there you check civility at the door if it's a worthy cause. So like the tiptoeing of like having the discussion or like not calling somebody out whenever they do something wrong, I think like we have to don't be malicious about it, don't be mean about it, but like we can't tiptoe around the issues anymore, right? Like when someone says they're doing something and you kind of like, well, I don't want to start a conversation, or like I don't want to upset them, or like we've been doing that. We've been babying, I think, to an extent, people a little too much around things like, oh, all you need is an EDR and email archiving and you're good, right? No, like it is an iterative process that you have to go through, and it's this constant evolving processes, and it's not just about which tools you put in place, but it's about your policies and your processes and everything. Like, we have to have those conversations every step of the way, and Matt will agree, it's a slog, right? Like, I feel like Matt's been talking about it for 6 years now, right, or 7 years, and like we're still at the same point.
That's
We're
what
still
I was
having the
going
same
to say.
conversations every day.
Yeah, even
we have
CIS
to, yeah.
IG1, right? If we had that just as a baseline, everybody would be the whole industry would benefit from that.
Yep.
I think we have to get the MSP space to stop saying things like, well, I'm too small, and that's not how this works, right? Like, if we look at this through the consumer lens, it's like, hey, at home, when I use banking online, they're forcing me to use a PIN number. But like when I'm at work, no, that's do not bother me with 2FA because, I have an IT person that you go talk to them. I'm not going to be bothered.
There's in relationships can often be fixed only through introspection, right? Like you can't make somebody else fixed. Introspection is the only thing you have control over. And I think as an industry, we're so ready to look everywhere else, right? Like as an industry, I see people come up and go, my clients won't take MFA and they won't do the things I ask them to do and they won't do the thing. And then they'll say, my vendors, they're not doing the things I asked. They didn't even talk about this one incident thing. We'll point the finger everywhere else. But boy, if you went and did the whole man in the mirror methodology and started right there, you'd probably find that that's actually the biggest thing you can do. Because if you go through that, you'll have the fire and the understanding to drive your clients to do the right thing or you'll fail at that. But ultimately, you can at least control you. And I bet most people listening to this or people listening later haven't done them. They haven't focused on them. Even to Joy's discussions and Dawn, your world around CMMC and talking about those compliant services, like it starts with me and how I do my processes, how I manage my people, and how I use those things to provide these things at a high level of reliability and efficacy that I can then demonstrate that for a product I sell to someone, right? Like, but that's not how MSPs think about this. That's just not how it works. And even as we sit here now, we probably all have the bigger flaws with ourselves that we could work on that don't take anybody else but us to do. And I think, Roddy, that comes from having those hard conversations. I think that comes, if I could give one actionable advice for someone in 2025, as a leader, an owner of an MSP, or a manager in a department responsible for security, empower someone to own it.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, Matt. The same argument I have with MSPs who say, my clients just don't understand the need for security is the same advice I give my buddy who says, I can't find the right person to date. And I go, if you can't date yourself, you're never going to find the right person to date.
True
so
story.
if you can't find a partner or a client to buy your product or understand why, maybe it's because you don't understand why. And
I've been referring to it as we have to put our own oxygen masks on first.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And in the same fashion, you'll pass out, not make it through if you don't. So that's kind of the call to action this year, y'all. Like, enjoy the oxygen mask.
And if the plane crashes, at least you had a high O2 level when it hit.
Right. You were really aware of what happened.
You were really aware.
The ground.
All right. CJ, obviously the CompTIA Trustmark ties into a lot of, that introspection aspect of this for an MSP. What things can we look at coming or changes to the Trustmark, or what should we expect with Trustmark in 2025?
I think one of the things that we'll see is more on the education front. I think that's really one of the biggest challenges we've seen is, we could talk about what version do we need to come up with next for the Trustmark. And well, that's just an iterative of something that's, a lot of MSPs still aren't doing. So if we can't get them to do the minimum, how do we continue to add layers on top of it? And so I think that's one of the areas that we'll see a large focus on. And then the other piece is really staying abreast of some of the conversations that are happening right now around the proposed rule with HIPAA, the final items coming out from CMMC, is to remember that the Trustmark isn't meant to replace other frameworks. It's meant to help MSPs get on the journey, mature their journey, look at those things that they might need to do that further. CMMC isn't necessarily that it's harder or easier than the Trustmark. It's not that they're easier or harder. It's that you have to do different things. You have to prove things that you may not have had to do on the one that you did before. And I think a lot of MSPs still today, unfortunately, are looking for someone to just bless them and tell them they're doing well and that they can stop trying so hard.
Can we
And
talk
that's
about the
just
easy
not good.
button? The easy
Yes,
button,
yes.
right?
There is
And
no easy button.
but to your point, I think a lot of MSPs look for that easy button, right? I want to solve this with a
Absolutely.
tool because it's the easy button. I want to solve this with a thing. I want to pay for something because it's the easy button.
We buy weight loss pills.
Well, and
Right?
just so you guys know, I think this is something that you, those listening, many of you know that the association, as we've known it as CompTIA, is very shortly going to be something new. And one of the biggest challenges we've had come our way have been things like, well, what's the sticker going to look like? What's my badge going to be? Like, is it still going to say this or that? And it's like, if that was the reason behind why you're doing this, we've wasted a lot of your time and energy going through this program. And that's one thing that I think we haven't done a good job of emphasizing is the trust mark was about you starting the journey or getting further along your own journey with people around you going in the same direction, not whether or not you got to a destination that included a sticker.
But the sticker.
Yeah.
I mean, we will
Well,
print some
but-
stickers.
Just to
What's
add an
my
analogy to
incentive
that.
to have a sticker?
Just to add an analogy to that, like, why would you do the trust mark if you then would have to do CMMC or other things you might down that path? Like going to the gym and picking up a weight and doing this action prepares you for doing a slightly different action in to accomplish a different goal. Like it's getting the muscles ready, it's getting the body ready, the joints ready, getting flexible and ready to do these things where you're documenting processes, you're following through, you can provide evidence, you have the process you're going to follow to show what you need for evidence, to Joy's point when you're sitting at that table and you need to go navigate the network for evidence purposes, or like you're doing those things and growing that over time. But starting somewhere and getting used to the cadence, having someone own it, providing governance, having systemic methodologies to deliver it, allow you to then scale that and modify it for other things. And you'll find there's only so many ways you say have an asset inventory.
Right.
Right.
And to be fair to all of that, going through the trust mark is a phenomenal way to learn the process of how to do it, right? And I don't want to say like it's the training wheels method, but it is in its own way.
Sure.
From the standpoint of
Agreed.
you're learning how to do the thing and learning how to do it right? And you're gonna read the controls. You're gonna be mad about it because some of them don't read the way that you want them to read, and you're like, I don't even know what this
Yeah.
means,
Right.
right? And there's
True.
all of these things that you're going through, but you have to learn to go through them, understand them, really dig in, learn the process, do the thing, and then go cry on CJ's shoulder because you hate the thing about the electricity piece, right? Because we've had
Yes.
that conversation. But it's a phenomenal learning piece of like, how do I deal with that? That doesn't apply to me. How do I write that? How do I write that appropriately? What does that look like for me? So there is a
In a
phenomenal
low cost
way to
of
learn.
failure environment, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. That is the
really
best
a no
way.
failure. Like you would have to choose to fail as an MSP, the program, because we do everything we can to help you get to a place where you can go, oh, I can do this and I can keep going with this program. It's not a brick wall that you just hit. I actually had an MSP say this. They have the trust mark, and one of the things that they said after they had gone through the assessment was, I wish I would have done this before I did my ISO and
Wow.
now I'm drawing a blank on what the other one was. Oh, SOC 2. And they said because the breadth of scope that the trust mark provided was a game changer.
Yep. That's the
And-
big delineability.
And like I
breadth and
tell
depth.
all of our partners, right? Like the first time you write a policy, or the first time you follow a framework, or the first time you do whatever, you're gonna do it wrong probably. But that's
That's
okay, right? We learn. It's human nature, right? We learn from our mistakes, and if we're passionate about the work we do, we're going to improve upon it, right? So don't be afraid. Like it's like anything else. The first time, Matt, or anybody who films content, the first video you ever filmed, did it place? Where did it place at your local film festival? Like it's not, it's horrible. Like you can't.
Please, Mr. Lee, would you stop calling us?
Exactly, right? Like no, but like it's the same thing, right? It's gonna suck, and you're gonna look at it and be like, "This, I did a bad job," but you did something, and like just improve upon it.
You'll get
like,
better.
Well,
here's a question to ask, because this is kind of I don't want to say it's funny. We're talking about cybersecurity and IT and speeds and feeds, but Joy, I mean, tell me, how many times do you run into like, I'm not sure that would construe as being a policy, and so maybe we should, like, there seems to be a huge deficit in our space, and maybe even broader than that, of like, what is a policy? What needs to be in a policy? And how do I ensure that we as an organization follow that policy?
You're going to trigger
That's
Matt. He's going to go on his asset rant in like 2
Please, yes. I
seconds.
was about to say, like, please don't say asset.
Well,
Well-
let me just say that there's a couple of organizations that are helping besides CompTIA Trustmark. You know, Brian Hubbard's MSP CyberX,
Yep.
the MSP Collective. There's a lot of resources out there to help them. One of the things that I love, though, that Don was alluding to, and it comes back to the oxygen mask theory, is that when you're guided by an organization like CompTIA on how to get your own MSP ready for something like this, that translates immediately to teachable skills that you now have with your own customers. And
Yep.
like, how do we not overwhelm our customers? How do we bring them into the compliance realm? And I just believe that the journey is so important to experience yourself. I've always
Yeah.
believed that in my MSP career for 28 years, that you do it yourself first and then you help your customers do it. But it's like imperative when it comes to compliance. You just can't go in and say you're going to do it for your customer without having done it for your own MSP.
Well, and since I haven't shoved anybody off on a cliff in a while, and it's time to talk about that analogy, I think one of the things that also comes from it, someone said in the chat earlier, of like, once you've done it yourself, you'll be able to articulate it to your clients. Joy, you kind of just reiterated that as well. But it's the same thing of like this effect of me, Roddy, and Dawn are standing up at the top of a cliff looking over a crevasse and over a very tall mountain. And I reach over gently and push Roddy off to his death. Is there any chance that Dawn doesn't take either a defensive pose, shove me off the mountain herself, right, or run down the mountain? There's zero chance of that. But as she runs down the mountain and she runs into CJ coming up and she says, "Hey, CJ, don't go up there. There's somebody pushing people off the mountain up there." Is there any chance CJ doesn't believe her? Not a single one. Why? Because she's done it. She's seen it. She's been in it. And once you go through these processes yourself, you'll realize how you could never have defended yourself without these things. You could never have applied these without that. It was a joke. And until you go through it, you just don't know it. And once you do that and you start talking to your client about these things and saying, "No, why am I doing it? Because it's the only way we can do it." Same thing you did with the way you deploy machines. Same thing you did with the way that you acquire assets. Same thing, like all of those things became proxies of you trying to be efficient as an MSP and make profit. Right? These things will continue to play as you become believers in what
And
you're
you're
doing.
bringing empathy into that conversation.
Yep.
And you're helping them change their culture.
Yes, absolutely.
And all future interactions with Matt Lee from my side will be only through something virtual.
I said gently.
It's okay, Roddy. I'd catch you.
No,
Well, I mean-
I hope someone pushes me off the cliffs.
That's gonna segue us into our one bold prediction here. Maybe it's that Matt Lee is gonna push people off cliffs for the year, but
That's in the news.
so let's start with CJ, because I think we finished up with you the last time. Like, what is your bold prediction for this year, whether it be on the cyber side of things or the compliance side of things? What do you think people are going to do? What are vendors going to do? What do you think it looks like?
I think it's hard to predict the future on this one. I do truly believe that compliance for the MSP space today is largely going to fall on the MSP taking the initiative to adhere to a compliance framework of some kind, whether it's the Trustmark or CMMC. While there are MSPs obviously regulated already for what they're doing into the DoD space, but they have to do this. And if they don't, if collectively MSPs don't take the initiative to do that, then come end of 2025, I think what we will get handed to us as we go into 2026 is something that MSPs are not going to want to have to deal with.
I think that's fair. Joy, what do you think?
I don't know if it's going to happen within 2025. I hope so. But I think that MSPs are going to start leveraging tools that have GRC baked into them as just a part of the way that they do business.
One can hope.
Matt?
I would echo Joy's first off, just and add a little bit to, or at least the ability to gather the information I need to prove that I did what I said I was going to do while using your tool. I think more and more of that will become part of it too, from vendors and people understanding that call to action and need. I think the bold prediction this year is, I think there's going to, I think there's a lot of death this year. I genuinely believe there's a lot of death this year. I've seen it. I'll tell you a quick story. I took a call in one of my capacitances to give advice to an owner of an MSP that had just gone through what was seemingly a somewhat innocuous encryption of a small part of their Citrix hosting environment, which hosted privileged information for attorneys and doctors, and she has now closed business 1 year later on something that was acquired for $2 million 2 years ago. So when you start living that life, like, that's real. That really affects that human. That person is now saying, I hope next year I'll come back to life. I'm going to at least get a client next year. I'm going to retain my reputation next year. Like, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom and preach. I just think that this is that year where there's a separation of have and have nots in ways we just haven't expected before around MSPs. And the difference is only 49-51 a little bit. So, yeah, I think this is a good year to really focus on yourself and how you deliver your services, not just on profit, but on new profit options and opportunities, but also on shoring up with those profits some of the decisions you've made in the past that will execute you long term if they stay the same. That's all. I don't think this is a big you're not gonna make it, but just the simple things will make the difference in the next year.
Roddy?
All right, I got two. So, like, for IT providers in the space, right? I think those who are practicing good vCISO management need to adopt external attack surface management as a way to quantify or qualify risk for an organization, because a lot of time MSPs struggle with the way they talk to small businesses about risk, right? And sometimes small businesses don't even care about the financial side of it. So, like, how do you have a conversation with them? Well, have a conversation with them in the way an outside attacker views their organization. Right. So, like, look at, like Mike said, Matt said, identity management, right? Like, things like that. So, and talk to them in terms of how an attacker would look at their organization and drive some value there. And then the other thing, which it's the scary thing, is, like, I think we're going to see the first practical application of quantum computing, and it's going to be malicious, and we're going to find out, because we already know, right? We've seen the reports that, like, Diffie-Hellman and AES 128 could be reasonably broken with quantum, and I think we're going to see the first malicious application of that. And then we're going to realize that, like, hey, there's been a lot of data breaches where encrypted data was stolen, and we don't have to report that, and now it's not encrypted anymore, and now we have to report it, and we're going to see a slew of people who had incidents who didn't have to report it, who will not have to report it. And that's my take. Sorry for scaring you.
All scary. Dawn, what do you got?
I like the way that you folks have really kind of laid this out in a way that makes sense for the MSPs of the world, and, talking to clients the way that they need to understand what their business looks like. The reality is that most people don't understand that language, and they still won't understand when we say this is what an attacker sees your business as, but they will understand that threat landscape, that vulnerability, those threats, whatever you want to call it, so that you're using whatever language it is. It's like a cancer, right? And you don't let a cancer sit there and do its thing and do nothing about it. You go to your oncologist, which would be us, and you say, I really need to have my cancer removed because I would like to survive, that sort of thing. And you remove it, which is, get rid of the attack surface or mitigate it in the best way possible. But we can talk as MSP owners till we are blue in the face to folks and say, you are a target. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how small you are. You're just a payday. And they're like, yeah, but what are they really going to get? I don't know, your entire life, essentially, is what it boils down to. And it doesn't seem to register for some folks. But they understand cancer bad.
Are you saying SSL VPNs are cancer, Dawn?
Yes.
Okay. Because I would make that argument.
A very specific type of cancer.
ZTNA tunnels for the win.
Please, thank you, Matt. Please.
All right, Henry, what have you got?
I think we're going to see an acceleration of where the attack on a client that has poorer posture impacts that MSP that was not forcing good posture. And then you're going to see MSPs playing hot potato with those clients that don't value security. Because I can tell you, at least as part of our due diligence process, if you don't value what we're recommending, we don't want to deal with you. And I think that there's going to be a lot of small businesses out there that are in for a rude awakening as they get passed off from one MSP to another that doesn't want to own that risk.
I think the sad part about that is there's always the bottom layer of MSPs that will take anything, right?
Mhm.
They're not doing their jobs well. They're what we call trunk slammers, essentially, is really what it boils down to. They're going to take anything that comes along. So there's always something out there that
But
people
they'll
can
swallow
fail down
more
to.
poisoned pills.
What do you always
Right.
say, Matt?
Laugh, I apologize.
Nope, you're good.
No worries.
Thanks, guys. Love being
Matt,
here.
Bye, Joy.
Matt, it's like you always say, like if you chain yourself to the ocean floor, you're probably going to drown eventually.
Yeah. And I'm also the guy that you say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But you can sure drown him and choose where he dies, so it didn't leave you out there in the desert where you don't have water, right? Like, anyways, I digress.
But you're a good human.
Yeah, you try,
Exactly.
Yeah. But there are a lot of initiatives out there to try and, assist those people so that not everyone has to drown. And hopefully people take advantage of those resources.
Yeah. It's a self-selected aspect here.
All right. Any
Yeah.
parting words before we move on? Because we are actually over time.
Love
I'm
y'all.
just worried about Matt Lee wants to drown people and push them off a cliff.
I don't want to. I'm forced into this position. No, I
forced
tease.
If you need help, Matt, just blink.
Both eyes? I don't know.
Despite the doom and gloom predictions that I have, right? Like I think we're moving into a better space. And I think like,
Amen.
we're having these conversations. I find people are more willing to be like, yes, I have to do something instead of just being like, no, I'm good. And they realize that the space, like they're gonna get eaten up by competitors who are doing the right thing and can prove
Amen.
it and are having those conversations with their clients and stealing clients. Like I see it all the time. So shape up or ship out, one of the two.
Awesome.
All right. Because we are over time. Upcoming industry events. What have we got going in February?
All right. So Wild West Hacking Fest is doing a traveling show into Denver in February, which will be interesting to see. CompTIA has a community meeting in Belgium. Network Group has their Q1 meeting in Birmingham. We will be, and the entire Tech Degenerates will be at ThreatLocker Zero Trust World in Orlando. And also at the same time in Las Vegas, Right a Boom will be going on.
And if you want to see our...
If you want to see that full list of events, I think we're probably tracking close to 600 at this point. Hop on that URL there.
Then for those of you that are interested in going to Zero Trust World, we do have an awesome discount code. It's $200 off of your registration, and there is your promo code. So be sure you jot that down if you are going, and we hope to see you there.
Yeah, big thank you to ThreatLocker for doing that for the community.
Last but not least, big thanks to all of our sponsors here at the Tech Degenerates, and that's including ThreatLocker, Infima, CompTIA, Channel Pro Network, FlexPoint, Threat Captain, Zero Networks, IT Nation, Zentop Consulting, and Rhythms.
And if you are not currently already in our community, hop on thetechdegenerates.com and join the conversation. Take you to our Discord and lots of great resources and knowledge. Obviously, there's huge brain trust available, entirely free. And if you are interested in becoming a supporter of the Tech Degenerates and some of the initiatives that we are putting forth, I invite you to go through the QR code here. All right, what are we talking about next month, Dawn?
We are learning from the global MSPs and IT markets. We will have some of our friends from around the world joining us for the next live stream that we have going on. Awesome.
And a big thank you again today to those that joined our panel. Awesome, incredibly smart people. It's great for them to take time out to share their expertise with us. So
Yeah. So thank you to Matt Lee, Joy Beland, Roddy Bergeron, and Chris Johnson from CompTIA.
awesome. All right. Well, we'll see you all next month.
See ya.